Okay guys, this is going to be the first video for our Pastry Basics week. I'm going to show you how to make cream puffs and eclairs. It's a very simple recipe, very quick and easy to make. The second video is going to be actually filling and garnishing the eclairs and cream puffs. This is just the makeup, piping, and baking, so you can understand that process really quickly. We've talked a lot about the cream puffs and eclairs this last week. A quick understanding, the cream puffs are a stiffer batter, one of the quicker things to make in the Pastry Basics chapter. Starting off as a new pastry chef, understanding the cream puffs, they are leavened by steam. So you can assume that there's going to be a high proportion of liquid in the batter. Flour, eggs, large amount of eggs, and then we also have a large amount of water too. So the steam is going to be what leavens, what causes the cream puffs to rise and create that hollow center so that we can fill it with pastry cream with whatever type of filling that we want. The eggs, the egg proteins, once the product has risen, the steam has caused the cream puff to rise, the egg proteins are going to coagulate, they're going to form the structure and solidify, and boom, now we have our great cream puff. Usually starting at a higher temperature to allow that steam to really be created very quickly, and then dropping it down to a little bit of a lower temperature to finally solidify and toast off those cream puffs, okay? It is a really, really simple recipe. It's gonna be, a copy of it is in your assignment. I'm not a huge fan of the one out of the book. The one that we give you guys works really, really well every time, and it is very, very simple to make, okay? So, we have 4 ingredients. Technically a fifth is salt, but there's such a small amount of it in this recipe, we honestly put like half a pinch. You could honestly not even put it in here. When you start to get up to a bigger recipe, you're putting very small amounts of salt in there. Technically 5 ingredients, but the main 4 are your high gluten flour, which is going to be, for question number 1, what is our high gluten flour? What kind of flour is that? We got our high gluten flour, we've got our eggs, and we've got water. Final ingredient, butter. Essentially the steps for the recipe are going to be boiling our water, butter, and if there is salt in the pan, getting that up to a pretty good heat, and then adding our flour into the saucepan. We're gonna start stirring that until the dough pulls away from the hot pan. Once we know that that is set, ready to go, we're going to drop it in our mixer and mix it for exactly 3 minutes, essentially cooling the dough off enough so that we can then start to incorporate our eggs. We incorporate our eggs one at a time. Each egg is fully incorporated, then we add the next egg after the dough is cooled down, and you will have that nice stiff batter that we then make our cream puffs, and we can go ahead and start showing you how to pipe. So I'm gonna grab the camera and we're gonna go ahead and put this together. Whee! All right. We've got our 4 ingredients right here. Let's go ahead and get them into the saucepan. We've got water. Boom. In the pan. We've got butter. Oh, I got this. Oh, I got this. One hand. Boom. All right, got water and butter in the pan. Let's get it on the heat. Now it says to bring it to a boil. From the restaurant industry, we don't ever cook things on medium heat, so it's kind of low or high. I crank this bad boy all the way up. Butter typically won't burn too quickly, especially if there's a lot of water in there like that. So we're gonna get it up to some high heat. It says once it boils, you add your flour in and you stir until it pulls away from the pan. Well, if your water and butter are really, really hot, it's not gonna take very long. So I like to get mine very hot and add that flour in, and it'll pull away from the sides pretty quickly. I already went ahead and made the pastry cream, so we're gonna have that ready to go. We understand the concept for pastry cream already. Typically, the filling for cream puffs and eclairs is going to be a pastry cream or some kind of variation. Does that mean you always have to? No, obviously. You could put a rich ganache in the center that was stiff enough to hold up. You could put a flavored cream chantilly, some kind of chantilly mousse or meringue filling in there as well. You can do whatever you want. Make sure that your filling is thick enough. Same thing with the cannolis too. Your sweetened ricotta cream or your pastry cream for your eclairs, whatever filling you're trying to do needs to fill the pastry, right? So if it's too thin, it's just gonna weep and ooze right out. You need to make sure that whatever filling you make is thick enough to hold up inside your pastry. Buttercream for cakes. You could use buttercream and it'd just be really, really rich. Okay, so this is getting pretty hot. Letting that butter and water boil. This recipe, 9 times out of 10, tells you to use a wooden spoon. Essentially, this is trying to keep scraping up a lot of the flour off the bottom of the pan so that it doesn't burn and continue to stir properly. You could use a rubber spatula. Honestly, it wouldn't mess it up. I will say, when we get to garnishing and filling the eclairs though, having a nice wooden spoon with a thin handle will be one of your best friends. So, boiling pretty well. When I add the flour in there, I am going to turn the heat down a little bit. But for right now, getting up to a boil, I don't really need to worry about it too much. Okay, you see that butter is still solid, so we're going to give it a second to melt. Pretty much ready to go. See a piece of butter in there. I'm turning down the heat now. Just a little bit. And now we're gonna add our flour. Do this with one hand. It's not easy. Okay. One hand and constantly stir. Stir, 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 stir. This will form a stiff dough. And it's going to get very difficult for me to stir in about a second. So we're going to put this camera down. Boom, and stir. All right. It's going to form a thick dough very, very quickly. And then it's going to start to pull away from the sides of the pan. If you had that butter and water very, very hot, it will not take a very long time. You can honestly see it's already starting to pull away from the sides. So, I'm going to give it another minute. Just kind of cook the starch out of the flour a little bit. It's already pulling away from the sides, and we're going to be ready to go. What is the next step? Putting it into the mixer, right? And putting the paddle attachment on at a medium speed for 3 minutes exactly. This will perfectly cool down your dough so that you can start to add your eggs in without curdling and cooking your eggs. Okay. If you have the heat a little bit high or this is going a little bit long, you might start to smell a little bit of a burning smell. Just make sure that nothing's burning. Keep stirring. Once it pulls away from the sides, this forms a nice smooth dough, which is what it's doing. So you can see it. Boom. We're gonna go ahead, turn the heat off, put this in the mixer. I got my mixer right here. I'm gonna try to drop this in with one hand. Hey. Okay. Mixer up. 3 minutes. And what you can see is all that steam is evaporating, coming right out of the dough. 3 minutes. This will be cool. The tops of cream puffs and eclairs. Try to turn this video back towards me. The tops of cream puffs and eclairs are typically garnished with some kind of sugar thinner topping. So for example, a donut glaze would theoretically work for an eclair. Just make sure that it's thick enough to coat the top of the eclair or cream puff properly. A lot of times chocolate ganache, chocolate coatings, chocolate toppings can be used. You could essentially just melt chocolate, dip eclair and cream puff in there, realizing solid melted chocolate is going to re-solidify and cool down into hard chocolate. You bite into an eclair cream puff, a hard layer of chocolate on the top isn't necessarily appetizing or pleasing. Ganache being a thinner or smoother filling, thin enough, melted, dipping your eclairs. Now when you bite into it, even if it's cooled, that ganache should still be a nice, smoother, delicate texture so that it kind of blends in with your dessert. Standard is technically icing fondant. Now, when we get to cakes, we're going to talk a little bit more about the two different types of fondant, but realizing the original form of fondant wasn't the Play-Doh plastic covering that you roll out and put over cakes like we see today. The original fondant was an icing fondant. It still used inverted sugar, but think of a thinner donut type glaze. Icing fondant is that, and that is typically what a lot of professional pastry chefs and bakers will glaze or top their eclairs and cream puffs with. Does that mean it just has to be plain white? No. You can flavor it, you can change it. It could be chocolate, it could be strawberry. Have fun with it. If you've ever seen a really extravagant dessert case, or you go to a really nice pastry shop and they're making eclairs or cream puffs, you're going to see a variety of cream puffs. You're not just going to see a vanilla pastry cream filled cream puff with chocolate topping. You're going to see fruit flavors inside. You're going to see a bunch of different colored toppings. You can really go above and beyond with this, okay? Thinking about the dough. This is going to be question number 2 for the assignment. You've got 4 ingredients, salt, a pinch of salt, but technically the 4 ingredients: flour, water, eggs, and butter. If I wanted to flavor the dough, flavor this cream puff dough so that the actual cream puff itself has, say, a pumpkin flavor. I want to do pumpkin cream puffs. How would you suggest that we modify this recipe so that the cream puff and eclair dough itself has a flavor rather than just the filling? That's question number 2. It's kind of a creative one. Think outside the box. How would you do it? How would you modify this recipe to flavor the dough, okay? Let's check back in on our recipe here. It has been mixing now for about 2 minutes and 20 seconds. We're gonna give it another 20 seconds here. You can already see it's broken up a little bit. It's separating just a little bit, not a big issue. Most of the steam has gone. I can feel a little bit of heat still coming out of the bowl. A little bit of heat on the bottom of the bowl, that's okay. We're not going to change the speed of this. We're gonna leave it just like that. I'm gonna move this out of the way. And now we are going to start to drop our eggs into there. Remember, each egg dropped in should be fully incorporated before you add another egg, or almost fully incorporated. You can get away with it a little bit. So here we're gonna drop 1 egg in. You can start to see it. Stay separated first a little bit. The dough starts to absorb the egg. The batter comes together. And then usually what will happen is it'll kind of separate a little bit back again. So then I'll go ahead and add another egg. Boom. Same thing will happen again. And it's just about fully incorporated, so I'm gonna add 1 more egg. Ooh. Looks pretty good. 1 more. See, it gets really wet right when I add that egg into it. Starts to incorporate, then it dries out. Add 1 more. After all 6 eggs are added into here, you should see a pipeable, stiff batter. Boom. There we go. I'm gonna scrape down the sides just to get some of that egg off of these sides there. I'm gonna mix it just a hair longer, and then we're gonna go ahead and start piping. So I'm gonna reconfigure my camera so you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm gonna point you down a little bit so you might not see my face, but that's okay. So you can see what I'm doing. Alrighty. Alright, I'm gonna just scrape down the sides of this bowl real quick, and we're gonna pipe them out. Scrape down the bottom too, just in case, but 9 times out of 10, this is kind of a doughy recipe, so it usually pulls up all the stuff off the bottom. Get that back in there, boom. Just for another second there. We'll incorporate everything. This off the side. All right, we look pretty much ready to go here. You can already see it's a smooth batter. It's a little tacky, stiffer than, say, the butter tea cookie batter. Not quite that thin, but it is pipeable. If for some reason it is still too stiff and you're noticing you're having problems piping it, you can add a little bit of an extra egg if you need to. Try half an egg first. If it's still a little thick, add a whole egg. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and pipe it out. I'm going to just put a little bit of this in here. Use the rest for something else. All right. Cream puff batter in the piping bag. Now we're going to go ahead and pipe these bad boys out. The one video that was already on your assignment, he kind of showed you the trick already. Just like macaroons, to keep the paper from flying up in the oven, go ahead and put a little bit of batter on the 4 corners like glue. Make sure that that parchment paper sticks down, okay? Now, main difference between cream puffs and eclairs is what? The shape, right? Really the shape is the difference. So 2 different ways to pipe it. Realizing what is a cream puff? It's usually a tall hollow ball. Theoretically, that's the shape, a sphere, while an eclair is more of an elongated tube shape, right? So there you can already see we're gonna have a little bit of a difference of piping, okay? For the eclairs, we are going to do long tube-like shapes. Try to keep your eclair evenly fat, kind of a funny term, but the thickness of your tube. And then go ahead and twist it and cut it off, okay? Simple eclairs. You dictate the size and shape, right? So if you want to do mini eclairs, you make small ones. If you want to do gargantuan eclairs, I'm gonna try to do a bigger one here. Just keep piping. Make sure that you stay with the same thickness. Boom. Now, cream puffs, in my opinion, look similar to when we pipe macaroons. Just realizing we're wanting a little bit more of a thickness and a little bit more of a definition. So we're trying to go a little bit taller. The break off is different from the macaroons. You are trying not to have what we call the little bit of a nipple on top of the macaroon, right? That little bit of a tip. We don't want that. Same thing with our cream puff here, okay? So when we pipe, we can pipe straight into the center, stay close to the tray, but come up a little bit, and then spiral it off so that you don't have this. That's not what you want. If that happens, you can push it down a little bit, but realizing you might not get the same clean looking cream puff. If you want larger, we're trying to go larger one here. We can give it a little bit of a spiral, but you still want to try to keep it controlled, okay? So cream puff and eclairs do have a little bit of a different piping method. Once we have those cream puffs ready to go, then we are going to bake. Take a couple more eclairs. Now I'm trying to show you guys, that's why I'm doing a bunch of different shapes and sizes. What's the problem here? If I'm doing a bunch of different shapes and sizes, the smaller ones are gonna cook and be done quicker, right? While these still need to stay cooking a little bit longer. So, just realizing if I'm trying to do this in a professional bakery, I really wanna keep consistent shapes all on one tray. Consistent shapes and sizes so that there's even cooking times and temperatures, okay? Baking, okay? The baking procedure in your book for the cream puffs is what I use. I don't use the recipe, but how it tells you to bake them off, that is how I bake them. So I'm gonna start these at 425 until they puff up and rise correctly so that they have their nice definition, usually about 10 minutes. Then we're gonna drop it down to 375 for the remainder of the time until they're nice and toasty and crunchy, just like they should be, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and bake these and then we'll get back to the next video.